Thank you, Patricia. Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited to talk to Jen. Jen, when she lived in Asheville, was a member of Flatiron Writers, and unofficially, I think I sort of took your place because right as you were leaving to go pursue a higher education was when I became a member. So I feel like we're like connected in that way.
Yeah.
Here is her beautiful book, Mannequin and Wife, Stories. It was published in September this year by LSU Press, and her story collection, Tales the Devil Told Me, won the 2020 Press 53 Award for short fiction. Her work has appeared in One Story, I love that publication, Crazyhorse, Lit Hub, the Iowa Review, The Rumpus, Shenandoah, Best Small Fictions 2020, and elsewhere. Jen has garnered numerous prizes from Washington Square Review, The Pinch, Salamander, Atticus Review, and more. She lives in Little Rock, as Patricia was saying, with her husband and several imaginary friends, which I have no doubt about after reading this. So welcome, everyone. Done reading, I'll take my glasses off for now. So Jen's going to read one of my favorite stories from Mannequin and Wife to start us off. And so I will just turn it over to you. I encourage everyone to, the three dots in your top right corner of Jen's square, if you can pin her video if you want to just see her as she reads.
Okay. Thank you so much, AK. Yeah, AK, AK and I are, we sort of flip-flopped places. I was a part of this wonderful writers group in Asheville called the Flatiron Writers Group. Some of my all-time favorites writing compadres are a member of this group. And when I left Asheville to go pursue my MFA, it was about the time that AK joined. So I didn't get to spend as much time with her as I would have liked, but now we're having this lovely conversation today. So I also wanted to say, so yes, my book, Mannequin and Wife, this is my debut book of short fiction. These stories were written over like about an 11-year period. And I'm going to read one of them that is also one of my favorites, although they're all my favorites. I'm going to read this story called Come Back, Rita. It originally appeared in Crazyhorse and was then also reprinted online. It was a runner-up for a reprint prize hosted by an online journal, or sponsored by an online journal called Sequestrum. So one other thing I want to say too is that I am so happy to be doing this event through Malaprops. I lived in Asheville for 16 years. I moved there right after I graduated from undergrad when I was 21, and really in 21, I was very young, and I actually worked in the cafe at Malaprops. One of my many service jobs that I had while I worked in Asheville is I worked as a barista in the cafe. So I made coffee and snacks and things like that, and I envied the booksellers. I looked longingly. I pined for the job of bookseller from the cafe counter. So and I was very jealous of the very cool people who had the bookseller jobs. So I'm just ecstatic to be reading through Malaprops. And also I want to thank Tommy Hayes, who has headed up the the Great Smokies writing program through UNC Asheville for 20 years. He founded it. He's headed it up for 20 years, and he's retiring, but he's the person who invited me to read for the Writers at Home series for this. So I am eternally grateful to him, as well as AK, Maggie Marshall, Heather Newton, the wonderful members of the Flatiron Writers, who also are all students of the Great Smokies too. Okay, so without any further ado, I'm going to read Come Back, Rita. Mickey's been on Percocet 3 months. He's been on the case 1 hour. He's been a PI 29 years. She answers the door in a pair of lavender stretch pants and a patterned silk blouse that transports him instantly to the shore. Mickey sees waves, spurts of foam, or does he see scales? It's all blues, greens, purples, not unlike a bruise, a fading shiner. In any case, the The blouse is shivering. It's winking at him. She's holding still, but the blouse is in motion. Her silvering hair is bobbed neatly, tucked behind one pierced ear. She wears pearl earrings. Her feet are bare and quite beautiful. She says her name is Naomi. You're Mr. Mercer? I am. She touches a gold locket suspended from her neck, smiles. Won't you come in? The blouse is long, but it doesn't cover her ass, which is quite firm for a woman of her age. She probably does yoga. Mickey studies its motion as they move over dense carpeting into one of those showplace living rooms, the kind that's only ever seen by company or the cleaning lady, full of breakable and sentimental things. There's a glass-topped coffee table, a sectional sofa stands sentry around the room's perimeter, impressive, intact seashells, ceramic figurines, and framed photos are positioned on every surface. Mickey hands Naomi his hat and coat and settles on the sofa's seafoam cushions, clearing his throat over what sounds exactly like a rushing tide. Mrs. Stein, Naomi. Naomi, Mickey says, flipping open the small notebook he's retrieved from his trouser pocket. How long has your husband been missing? My husband? She's not far from him, sitting cross-legged on a piece of sectional, her pretty feet tucked under her firm glutes. Mickey can smell expensive laundry detergent, lavender soap, deodorant, brine. He thinks of Rita, of summers they spent in the Keys, of chasing her along the shore, how their footprints were erased almost instantly, how cold the skin of her breasts was once he'd freed those pretty white orbs from the prison of her bathing suit top, how the gritty sand that collected beneath the stretch fabric always got in his mouth, the wonder of fucking his own wife in freshly laundered rental beds. Yes, he says, squinting at a page in his notebook. 30 minutes before Mickey took Naomi's call, the 38th Special bullet nestled against his 12th thoracic vertebra started causing him severe discomfort, so he popped a second Percocet, and he's now unable to interpret his own scrawl. Frederick, he says, or Felix, Fabian, Ferdinand, Frank, Naomi says. My husband's name is Frank. Mickey studies the notebook. He turns it upside down. For the first time in his life, he cannot decipher what he himself has written, and he feels like some dim-witted monster. He closes the cover, returns the notebook to his pocket. Frank, he says, right, sorry, not a problem. When did you last see Frank? Naomi smiles, unfolds her legs, places her feet on the carpet, sits up straight. She's as polished as a set of wedding silver. Everything about the woman screams privilege. She couldn't be less like Rita, who came from the wrong side of the tracks. Rita's abusive parents, traveling sideshow faith healers, dragged Rita and her 8 siblings all over the southeastern US before settling down in a rusting central Florida double-wide. Mickey's family wasn't wealthy, but his parents nearly disowned him for eloping with a girl from the trailer park. 2 days ago, Naomi says, around noon, perhaps a little earlier. So Frank's been missing more than 48 hours. Naomi shakes her head. Mr. Mercer, she says, it's not my husband who's missing. It's not. She shakes her head again. He's here then. No. The living room of the 2-story Spanish colonial revival is not unlike a terrarium. Sunlight streams in through 3 floor-to-ceiling windows. Mickey feels oppressed by the glare. His head begins to pulse, and he places a hand over his brow, rubs his temples the way Rita once did. They hadn't been married a month when Mickey realized that his wife possessed a paranormal knowledge of human anatomy. Whenever he hurt, Rita knew innately which part of him she should press, knead, or stroke to provide relief. After massage therapy school, Rita opened a practice out of their home, and business boomed. She attempted to teach Mickey the things she knew about manipulating muscle and connective tissue, but Mickey never could hold a candle to his wife. He still misses her touch. So you haven't seen Frank, Mickey says, for more than 48 hours, but you don't think he's missing. Naomi nods. Do you know where he is? I do, she says. Well, I know what he's doing anyway. Rita used to tell people the same thing whenever Mickey was on a 3-day stakeout, running down some cheating husband or disability scammer or crooked accountant. Mrs. Stein, Naomi, I thought you wanted me to find your husband, but he's not missing. Where is he then, says Mickey. Where is Frank? Naomi stands, advances on Mickey so swiftly he recoils. Her toenails, painted lavender, now butt up against his brogans. Naomi bends at the waist. He feels her breath on his cheek. He realizes he's getting an erection. My husband, she says softly, is out chasing his monster. Mickey holds himself very still. He wonders if this is a euphemism with which he is unfamiliar. Naomi's eyes are light brown, almost golden. On the surface, they're nothing like Rita's, which were bright blue, like the sky after all-night thunderstorms. It was storming when Mickey last saw his wife kneeling over him on their front hall floorboards, the Colt detective special he'd given her for protection in her right hand, those blue eyes hidden in shadow. What's wrong with me? Naomi says, tucking her hair behind both ears. I haven't offered you a thing. Would you like some coffee, Mr. Mercer? Or a cup of tea? Drinking coffee afternoon keeps Mickey up all night, so he takes tea, white jasmine. Naomi joins him. When he asks how long she and Frank have been in the house, she says 3 years. Says they moved to Tampa from San Francisco. Traded one Bay Area for another, Mickey says. Naomi nods. My whole family's on the West Coast. We only came here for Frank's work. Tampa's the lightning capital of North America, you know. What does Frank do? Naomi sips her tea, replaces the cup in its saucer. She looks at Mickey quizzically. He's a mad scientist. Mickey waits for her to laugh. She doesn't. Mad scientist, he says. I thought they only had those in the movies. Naomi shakes her head. So when you said, Mickey says, that your husband is out chasing his monster, I meant, she says, that Frank's spent the last 6 months in his basement lab, constructing a pseudo-human out of body parts he's stolen from cemeteries and morgues. 4 nights ago, during that record-breaking cloud-to-ground lightning storm, he managed to harness electromagnetic impulses and channel them into his creation, bringing it to life. 2 days ago, his creature broke free of its restraints. It tore the basement door off its hinges, staggered through the garden, and vanished into that cypress stand out back. When Frank got home from the farmer's market, I told him what happened. He took off after his monster, and I haven't seen him since. For what seems a century, Mickey tries to come up with a response. He sips his tea. He wonders if this privileged, polished housewife actually believes what she's telling him. He keeps thinking about kissing her exquisite instep. The glaring light outside the floor-to-ceiling windows is softening, withering. The day is dying. Well, Mr. Mercer, Naomi finally says. Mickey, she says, do you think you can help me? Mickey never wanted to cheat on Rita, but he did, multiple times, with women like Naomi, clean, pleasantly scented housewives, pretty women with tender hearts and good intentions, women with manicured nails and toned triceps, women whose husbands had gone out for a pouch of pipe tobacco or a pesto and arugula pizza and never come back, women who'd really done nothing wrong, women who deserved to be treated gingerly. Mickey always showered before he came home to Rita. He always stood for quite a long time before the front door, studying the peephole, wondering if his wife knew, if she would feel the afterglow of adultery in his muscles. if he would find Rita in the hall, waiting. Yes, Mickey says. He stands and crosses to Naomi, who sits opposite him on the sectional. As he settles beside her, he takes one of her hands, and the sound of the rushing sea rises in volume, drowning out his thoughts. I think I can help. The first thing I'll need is a glass of water. After he pops another Percocet, Mickey retrieves the notebook from his pocket. He asks Naomi where she imagines her husband's monster might have gone. She answers without hesitation, the beach. Mickey writes the word beach. Why would it go there? Naomi shrugs. Who doesn't like the beach? Mickey drives the BMW convertible parked in the Steins' red brick driveway. He and Naomi find Cypress Point Park, Davis Islands Beach, and the Ben T. Davis Beach deserted. They sit in the car in the Ben T. Davis Beach parking lot, watching the sun lower itself into the sea. I don't understand, Naomi says, shaking her head. I felt so certain. Maybe Frank's monster went to Clearwater, Mickey says, or St. Pete. As they make their way back to her neighborhood, Naomi tells Mickey that she and Frank have been married 31 years. They met at a house party in Pasadena. Frank was at Caltech studying biochemistry, neurobiology, and biomechanics. Naomi was in her first year at the Art Center College of Design. The couple spent the entire night moving from room to room, surrounded by people but ignoring them, talking about the human body, its design, and possible ways to improve it. Life on other planets, the stories of Philip K. Dick. The rising sun found Naomi and Frank on a sofa some fun-loving students had parked atop a pool table. Holding hands, a strange young man with an afro curled up beside them, snoring lightly. 2 days later, exiting her dorm room, Naomi nearly tripped over a small blue igloo cooler. Inside, surrounded by dry ice and hooked up to a 6-volt battery, she discovered the still beating heart of a rhesus monkey. Here we are, Naomi says, unclasping the locket suspended from her neck, opening it, handing it to Mickey. That's us back then. Mickey glances from the road ahead to the small oval pictures framed in gold and back again. Young Frank is dark and classically handsome. Young Naomi is a budding flower. Their faces are eager, their potential undeniable. Nice, Mickey says, pulling into the driveway. Thank you. Night has dropped its velvet curtain over Tampa, and Mickey finds that the Steins' living room feels less like a terrarium in the dark. He and Naomi don't bother turning on the light. They sit side by side on a piece of sectional, examining the tall windows, which stare back at them blankly. Percocet notwithstanding, Mickey has another erection. What now, Mr. Mercer, says Naomi. Mickey. He turns to her. Where does Frank keep his files? His files? His documents, journals, records, notes, that type of thing. Naomi places a hand on Mickey's knee, down in the basement. I think it's time, Mickey says, that we had a look at your husband's lab. No, but isn't that where he constructed the creature? Naomi nods. Her hand starts sliding up Mickey's thigh. And don't you imagine, he says, that the lab might contain clues to his whereabouts? Naomi's hand stops. Clues to whose whereabouts? Mickey hesitates. The monster's whereabouts? Naomi's hand starts moving again. I don't like going down there, she says. Why not? Frank says it's dangerous. How so? It's full of hazardous chemicals and ancient, complicated equipment. If I started fooling around with something and got hurt, Frank would never forgive himself. But you're a smart woman, Mickey says. Too smart to let that happen. There's another reason, Naomi says. Oh? She presses close to Mickey. Her hand hovers over his crotch. Her lips graze his earlobe. It's the monster, she says. The monster loves me. If I gave it the chance, Frank's creature would ravish me. Divested of clothing, Naomi Stein is proportional perfection. Her skin and hair and teeth glow in the dark. She straddles Mickey on the sectional and arches her back, her rhythms orchestrated by nature, dictated by the tides. Mickey doesn't think he's ever felt anything as heavenly as the tight swaddle of her cunt. He marvels at how goddamned hard he is, considering the Percocet. Even after they've both come, Naomi with a strange, inhuman cry, followed by a whimper, even as they lie curled together afterward, Mickey refrains from asking Naomi if she imagines that in raping her, her husband's creature would recognize her as a discrete individual or would merely be satisfying a base impulse. What's this? Naomi says, touching the deep divot in Mickey's right side. A scar. What happened? I got shot. When? 3 months ago. Doctors couldn't remove the bullet. It's sitting against my spine. Goodness, Naomi says, lightly caressing the divot. Who shot you? Mickey sees the split-level ranch house from a distance, as though on a drive-in screen. He sees himself in the glow of a street lamp, entering the dwelling he shared with Rita for 26 years. He sees Rita standing in shadow at the bottom of the staircase, wearing a white nightgown, lifting her right arm, squeezing the trigger. He sees himself going down, sees his wife rushing to his side, kneeling. Oh, Mickey, she says, I'm so sorry. I didn't know it was you. Honest, I didn't know. I thought, oh God, Mickey, I thought you were some kind of monster. He sees himself losing consciousness. He sees Rita placing the gun on the foyer table. He sees his wife exiting the house, never to return. An intruder, Mickey says to Naomi. I was shot by an intruder. You poor man, says Naomi, and Mickey feels her body tense. She pushes up to a seated position, rises to her lovely feet. She pads over dense seafoam carpeting, stands naked before one of the windows, peering out. Do you hear something? Mickey's about to say no, but then he does hear something, a sound other than the tide that keeps rushing through his head. A rustling, a stirring, a swish, the murmur of multiple feet moving through tall grass. As Mickey stands, as he moves toward Naomi, a bright spot appears in the distance. This beacon is joined by another and another. Outside, flares spark to life with increasing rapidity. These glimmers remind Mickey of a candlelit procession and seem to be swelling in size, moving closer. Mickey counts a half dozen, a dozen, 2 dozen. What's going on? He says. Naomi doesn't answer. She's wrapped both arms around her torso. Mickey reaches for one of her hands, peels it away from her body. It sits in his palm like a hunk of meat, like something dead. Mickey doesn't remember her skin being so cold. Naomi, he says, what the hell is this? They're coming, she says. Who? The Tampans. Residents of Tampa? Naomi nods. What do they want? I'm guessing, she says, that they've come for Frank's monster. The Tampans carry torches and various household implements, pitchforks, hammers, rakes, axes, hoes. As they crowd around the floor-to-ceiling windows, Mickey sees that their sun-tanned faces are twisted into masks of rage. They're shouting, but their voices are muffled by the glass. The dull sound washes over Mickey like an angry tide. The Tampans start pounding with fists, then with weapons. In the glow of their torches, Mickey manages to read their lips. He makes out the words monster and die, the words blood and fiend. But there is no monster, he says. Naomi backs away from the windows. Mickey's still holding her hand, and he spins her toward him. The mob gathered outside continues assaulting the glass with pitchfork handles and axes. Naomi, Mickey says, Talk to these people. Tell them there's nothing inhuman in this house. Mickey, she says, I can't do that. She lifts her chin, and Mickey studies her face carefully. In the sinister flicker of torchlight, he thinks he sees something strange, a seam running along her jawline. I don't understand, he says. I think you do. A pane shatters, then another. Shards rain into the living room, splinters that sparkle in the torchlight. The roar grows deafening. The Tampons are shouting, muscling their way inside. They grab seashells, figurines, family photos. They hurl these delicate items against the walls. As three large men stomp through the glass-topped coffee table, Naomi tugs Mickey from the room. They race through the darkened house. In the kitchen, Naomi presses something hard and spiny into Mickey's hands. She flings open the back door, shoves him. Go, she says. Get out of here. What about you? She shakes her head. Frank's gone, Mickey says. He's not coming back. I know. So come with me. I can't. Why in hell not? Because, Naomi says, I'm responsible. For what? People make each other, Mickey. Couples make each other. And Frank and I are no exception. What are you talking about? She's standing 2 steps above Mickey, and she bends slowly at the waist, seizes Mickey's biceps, presses one of her cheeks to his. A pleasant tingle floods Mickey, the flutter of Naomi's long lashes beating against his skin, not unlike the wings of an insect, trapped, dying, imprisoned behind a wall of glass. Oh, Mickey, she says, don't you see? We're all gods and all monsters. From a stand of cypresses a half-mile distant, Mickey watches flames feed on the stucco walls and terracotta roof tiles. The .38 slug bites into his spine, but Mickey's stash of Percocet is in the pocket of his trousers he last saw balled up on the Steins' living room carpet. Mickey stands in the cypress grove, naked, shivering. He's debating running back, braving the conflagration for his painkillers and his clothes, when he looks down and sees the queen conch shell Naomi handed him as she hustled him out. Mickey lifts the shell to his ear. He hears the rush of the sea, and the inferno before him vanishes. A beach takes its place. The sun is sinking. The tide is rolling in. Rita is there in a white nightgown, racing along the shoreline. A colossal creature is chasing her, an inhuman monster assembled from spare parts, inexpertly sewn together. Mickey starts to call out a warning, but he realizes the creature isn't menacing his wife. She and the monster are laughing, moving in tandem across wet sand, frolicking in the swells, making Mickey feel like an intruder. He wants to tell Rita she was right, to tell her he forgives her, to beg her to come back. But he's afraid of her response. So he watches her cavort with another monster in the pounding surf, which wipes away their footprints as soon as they appear. The end of the story. Thank you. That's the end.
Thank you, Jen.
You're welcome.
Oh, I love that story. I was so glad when you told me that's the one that you would be reading, partly because I just love it, partly because I think it's kind of fun because this is October and it has some the creature monster themes going on.
Yeah.
But also because, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's definitely a Frankenstein story.
Yes,
it's definitely
yeah. I didn't want to like name it on the nose, but yeah. But it also, so many of the things that run throughout all the stories, I feel like are all in that one.
Yeah.
Or that, that I noticed. And so I'm going to just jump right into those.
Great.
One thing that I felt like was just throughout is this, you deal with a lot of sort of, I guess creation myth is what I would say. And what I kept noticing was the proximity of birth to death
Uh-huh. Yeah.
in so many of the stories, and the way that you kind of let that friction, um, birth to death and sometimes pre-birth, just creation to birth to death,
Uh-huh.
runs through this. Is that how conscious is that? When did you discover that as a theme?
Well, I guess that I definitely feel, I'm someone who feels, I think the tension, you could think of a human existence as being one tense line drawn between these two events. Like there are two things we all have in common, right? They're just the two. We're born and we die. That's really it. I mean, not that there aren't other things that we have in common, but I guess for me, I'm someone who unknowingly all my life has felt that seemingly oppositional ideas, terms, feelings, concepts, are in fact more alike, closer together than any of us may want to ever believe or think. So, and not just in terms of life and death, which hopefully most of us have a good long stretch, right, in between the two, but impulses like, let's say, love and hate, right? I mean, love and hate is a really simple one, but impulses like, let's say, attraction and repulsion. I think that there probably comes a time in all of our lives when we're maybe, young adults, when we begin to understand that perhaps, why am I drawn to these things that are bad? Why are these things that are bad for me? Why do they seem so interesting and wonderful? I think that this is something that throughout my life, I for many years was processing unconsciously and dealing with unconsciously. And then when I started writing, these stories just came out of me. And I see, I don't. Most of us who write don't think too much about thematically what we're doing until we're asked then later to go back and look at what we've done. So for many of the stories in this book, I wrote in a mad fury, because for many years I wrote like beyond full time. I was like someone who didn't start writing until quite late in my life compared to most people. I was 30 and I just decided I'm going to try to do this. That's not to say that there wasn't a background in place. My mom, I was raised by a single mother whose fondest wish was to be a writer, a published writer. She wrote when I was a small child. I would watch her sitting up all night typing, on her typewriter. And she was so intense and everything. It was kind of scary. And I didn't think that I could write something that someone else would ever want to read. I just don't have much, like, I don't think of myself in those terms. So it took me many years to even begin to try to write. And then walking into a classroom and sharing it with other people was a whole nother level of like anxiety for me the first few years. So, but I think that I had been grappling with all these sort of all the business of being human and working on it internally for many years. And then when I began writing, it just kind of all spewed out of me, in this. And so now I look back and I think, but most assuredly, one of the things that I see most in my work is that I collapse binaries. I can't, for me, we think that things are binary. Nothing is binary. Everything is really part of one sort of, we're all attached. And, we love the people the most. I mean, this is a phenomenon of someone like my mother. My mother has Alzheimer's. She's now in the later stages. It's been going on for 11, 12 years. And the person that you love the most and that is never going to leave you is the person that you will, and I mean, that's the person that that you will attack and be cruel to, and because that the love it's so strong that they're never going to leave you. So there are all these ways in which human beings we're all practicing these things every day, but most people don't see them. And I guess I see one of my projects as a writer is to be like, hey, look, these things aren't actually that far apart. They're much closer together, which I think is comforting to people. There's a saying in the creative writing classroom that some work, and I would say my work definitely falls in this category, is meant to comfort the disturbed and disturb the comforted. And, some people don't like that kind of work. Totally cool. It's there. But I think that a lot of people who are disturbed by feelings they may have, I kind of hope that my work is the kind of work that shows them that those are human feelings. And all these things are really one giant nut that are wrapped up inside of us. Love and hate's okay to feel like you are perhaps, a monster. It's okay. everybody's at least part monster, I think, in my conception of the world,
Absolutely.
everybody's part monster.
It's a spectrum, some more than others, maybe.
Yeah. But yeah.
Yeah, so well said. I love that about collapsing binaries. I think that's,
Yeah.
you do that so beautifully.
We need binaries. Human beings need to organize the world in order to grapple with it. We need categories. Sure. But then if you're someone who thinks a lot about the way the world works, you begin to see categories are absolutely imposed by us and really have no inherent meaning. So it's like this part of being, I think, someone who thinks, unfortunately, I mean, don't get me wrong. I wish I didn't think so much about the human condition. I think I'd be more content. But anyway, we all struggle with a lot of similar things like this. And I understand that we need binaries in order to get through the world. But I think it's also good to keep in mind that things aren't necessarily as far apart as they may seem all the time. So
absolutely.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think content people probably don't end up writing much. So there's that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I wanted to ask you, one of the things that I remember you and I were talking about Flatiron Writers and how we kind of missed each other and didn't get to know each other well during that time. So it's odd that we have traveled together. Sort of, we went to AWP together on an 8-hour drive there and back, and then we ended up on a plane together once to AWP. And so I remember both of those times one of the things that stands out to me about you is your love of film. Yeah. And I feel like that is in this book just all over the place, directly in the story about the Big Top Drive-In.
Yes.
I'm not, the title's probably not right. But
Rebirth.
Yes, Rebirth of the Big Top. All right. But indirectly, just on every page, I think. And so I think you're the person I've known who's really, I think you watch film in the way that a lot of people read or even like exercise. I think back then, I think you at least watched one film a day, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm curious about what drew you to this medium when you're so enamored with film and where the two kind of overlap and inform each other.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm a big time. So I had two parents, but my father wasn't much in my life, but he and my mom were both big film people. They also both loved literature. My mom more so than my dad. So I had the people that raised me loved both of those mediums. And I've always, like, I don't know, like turning to writing. I think that one of the reasons that I'm more well suited to writing as a endeavor is because you do it by yourself. And I'm something of a loner, like I'm a real introvert. And if you want to write, you have to be someone who's really okay with spending tons and tons of time alone, like tons of it. And so, a film, I can't even imagine the thought of trying to get a film done, like the number of people you would have to have agree and bring all in onto the same page. Like a film is such a group effort in such a huge way. And in terms of film, the writer is the least important person in the room. I don't know if do you know screenwriters, people that I've talked to who write screenplays are like, oh, we like they're sweeping up the floor. Like the screenwriter's like the least important person in the film. But that's, on a Hollywood scale, right?
Right.
But I guess both my parents were my dad particularly was a Hitchcock and a various other mid-century big movement nuts, and showed me all of his, showed me Psycho when I was 6, and I was like, and told me all about he went to see Psycho in a theater in Chicago, and like the pandemonium that broke out. Literally, people were climbing the seats, crawling under them, screaming and running from the theater. When I don't know if you've ever, when Psycho came out, it was literally that. They were all over the country, all over the world. People were flipping out because nothing that graphic, that had never been done. And people were so either terrified, horrified, incensed, they were having, so film, film is something that I love, and I see, but I can't see myself making it. I have never, ever once thought that I would like to be involved in the making of a film. Not that I wouldn't like to try my hand at writing a screenplay. I would like to do that. And I think that one of the things, I mean, I've actually thought about that more and more as I've become more comfortable dealing with dialogue. To write a screenplay is literally, it is all dialogue. So it's no exposition. If you're a writer who likes to use exposition, I think turning to screenplays or plays is kind of challenging, can be more challenging. But in terms of as a medium to as an audience member, I mean, film is, that is the mode of our time, our generation.
Sure.
Film is what is happening, and visual texts are the way the world is going. I mean, and I hate to, as a writer of words who wants people to, who loves, I don't read on a Kindle. I don't own a Kindle. I only read paper books. As I mourn the loss, but I do believe that within the next couple of generations, everything is information is going to be delivered via image and picture. That's just the way the world is going. And so I think that there's a way in which film has shaped the world that I live in as someone who was born in 1974 so tremendously. And that interests me. That interests me so much, because I'm also very interested in the world that was shaped exclusively by literature. Before the 20th century, before film became a thing. That world also fascinates me. But the fact of the matter is, I'm living in the world, and we're all living in the world that has been literally cut and shaped and printed by movies. We all do. So, I mean, much of what we do in our lives, we do because we see it on the screen. And as terrifying as that may be, I mean, that literally is, and now it's reality television and all this, but I mean, we imitate what we see, and film is what for all my life has been. And I guess I also love classic film. I tend to watch, I try to watch all the, because I like to see how we got to where we are now. I like that also about literature. That's why I do feel that reading classic literature and watching classic film is important if you want to work in those mediums. Many writers, young writers who are fantastic, who are out there, none of them, we talk about books, none of them have read any 19th century literature. None of them know any of that. And that's perfectly, but I am someone who believes that looking at the history of this endeavor, looking at what people have done in the past to see how we've come to where we are now, I think that's important. And I'm sad that idea, that looking historically at what we've done, and this is not just in terms of lit, this is also in terms of our daily lives, history. I mean,
of course,
history is dying as a field, as an endeavor in undergraduate schools. It's dying, and it makes me incredibly sad, because I do think that you have a record right there.
Context.
Yeah, exactly. I was teaching undergrad for a couple of years. Most of my students I could not make them understand what the word context means. I mean, I just couldn't. And I think it's about the way that they take in information and the way that they're being shaped and formed by the world that they live in. But anyway, we have a record right here that we can study. And I think it's a shame to not study it. So I love all historical documents. Woo!
Go history. Go knowledge.
Yes, please.
I just wanted to say, if anyone has any questions that they'd like to ask, there's the chat at the bottom. You'll see the little bubble, and you can type in a question there, and I'll be looking at those. So I wonder if you would read the 2 epigraphs for us and tell us how they informed.
Oh, yeah. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that'd be great. This is good. Epigraphs, many people ignore them. I know. Some people are like, what's an epigraph? Epigraphs
give you more context.
That's exactly. So yeah, the context, sort of a road sign. Someone asked me at another, they're like, are these a warning? Yes,
in this case, yeah.
Absolutely, yes, they are a warning. But the 2, I love epigraphs, and I've always planned to, I'll have epigraphs picked out on a book before I write it. I'll have a whole page of, possible quotes, because I mean, that's just the kind of nerd, it's the kind of big dork I am. I go around collecting quotes that I like, right? So the Francis Bacon quote from Of Beauty, the shorter quote, that one I've had on reserve for quite a while. And I had planned, I knew that I would try to use that as an epigraph of a book, but I knew I also wanted a longer quote to contrast, as my husband says, to clash just right with the quote that I already had. My husband was once in the, I think he was in Dillard's in the shoe department, and two women were there together looking at shoes, and one woman said to the other, "Oh, those are perfect. Those clash just right with your handbag." And so for the rest of his life, it's everything clashes just right, which is, I love. So,
That's great.
So as I say, as you already mentioned, I like to sort of collapse binaries. I like it when things work against each other and with each other. So I knew I wanted to use the Francis Bacon quote, which I think highlights the book's strangeness. But then I also wanted a quote that in a way highlighted the book's mundanity, ordinariness, and sense of humor. So I was actually teaching a creative nonfiction workshop, and I was looking for essays for my students to read, and I came upon Cy Shonigan's Hateful Things, which is part of the Pillow book, which so she was like a first century courtesan, a lady courtesan in China. And she wrote this book called The Pillow Book. And one of the well-known pieces from it is an essay. So it's just a series. Essentially, she would have been the queen of Twitter. It's just these short, little pithy, here is what really bugs me. I cannot stand it when someone does this. That's basically what they all, oh God, when I've just taken off my clothes and then, he comes knocking on the door and I'm like, oh, please leave me alone. Those are kind of what they're like. So as soon as I read the one that I used for the book, I knew that I wanted to use it. So I'll read them together. Okay. So, indeed, one's attachment to a man depends largely on the elegance of his leave-taking. When he jumps out of bed, scurries about the room, tightly fastens his trouser sash, rolls up the sleeves of his court cloak, overrobe, or hunting costume, stuffs his belongings into the breast of his robe, and then briskly secures the outer sash, one really begins to hate him. So that's from,
I love that so much.
This essay, Hateful Things, these are the things that really irritate her. And then the second one is, there is no excellent beauty that hath not some strangeness in the proportion. And that's from Of Beauty by Francis Bacon. So as I say, I hoped, after a lot of time of thinking about this, I felt like those two quotes, sort of both worked against and with one another to hopefully capture because what I hope to do is walk a line. My stories are undeniably strange. Yes, they're bizarre. Yes. But at the same time, they deal with the very mundane business of being alive, of being a human being, of being married to someone who will not pick up their socks. I mean, it's like so
Absolutely.
At the same time, I feel like that. So I like to think that I walk a line, and that I, in ways I'm showing what is mundane about the extraordinary and what is extraordinary about the mundane. That's kind of hopefully one of the things I like to try to do. So.
Absolutely succeed at that. We have a question from Carol Anders, and I've always been curious about this from writers too, is her question is, do you begin a story with the end in mind? And I would just expand on that a little bit. And do you begin a story kind of knowing the shape of it? You have a lot of pieces in here that are, I guess, would be flash, 1 or 2 page stories.
Yeah.
Do you know that they're going to be that scope when you begin? Do you know that a story is a story as opposed to a novel when you begin? And then Carol's question about the end, having the end in mind.
Yes, great questions. In terms of the flash, I do. I think that when I first began writing, my stories begin with an idea, usually like Iphigenie in Baltimore. I knew I wanted to write a story about a virgin who writes pornography. I didn't know she would be the strongest woman alive. I didn't know any of that stuff. I didn't know I was going to do the 3-person point of view, which is one of my favorite techniques, which I learned by writing that story. So I start with some sort of scenario. But then what happens from there is totally organic in terms of short fiction. I do not know what's going to happen. I do not know how it's going to end. I do know that I have learned over the years that when I have an impulse and it feels very, it feels like close and tight and quick, I feel like I know it will be a piece of flash. And for me, writing flash is wonderful because I get to the place of hooray, I've finished something, and that intense feeling of accomplishment that completing a piece of work to your satisfaction gives you. I get there in like 2 days or 3 days instead of like, 2 weeks or 2 months or 2 years, So I definitely know when something wants to be shorter and when something wants to be longer. And now I've gotten to the point where after writing for so long, I can usually pinpoint how long a story is going to be within a couple pages. Like this will be 16 pages. This will be, 18
Wow.
pages. Because I think that it's just, but I never know. I'm not someone who I don't outline, I don't plan the stories ahead of time. And that's what I'm running up against now in trying to write a novel, which I've been trying to do for years, because if you write organic, you can't, I can hold a really long short story in my head, like 30, 40 pages, not a novel. That's too much. So I know other writers who function the same way I do. And, I'm still trying to work out how someone who generally everything is organic and nothing is planned ahead of time can possibly write something where you have to be able to set some of it out ahead of time. And I've written a bunch of novels that will never see the light of day, but right now I'm trying to, I have pulled out a novel I worked on for several years and have shaken it out, and I'm completely revamping it. So I'm fingers crossed I can finally figure out how a writer like me can write a novel. But never do I know. Actually, there's one piece of flash that I have written that I knew I wanted the story to end a certain way, but I don't think there's ever been, and that is By the Numbers, the story about the young girl who's on the pirates kill her father and take the ship.
Yes.
But other than that, it's always a mystery. I guess there's a way in which I feel I need to be surprised. So being surprised by what happens is so important to me. And there's a way in which when you when you plot out something, and I don't know if you've ever tried like plotting out a whole novel and then writing it, I just begin to feel like, what am I doing? This is so boring. And how could a reader be interested in this if I'm not interested in, but because I know what's going to happen. But anyway, it's
That's a great answer. Yeah, it is. And I'm experiencing that right now too. This has been so great. I think we're nearing time. We've got like just a minute. It's been so fun to talk to you. And I just wanted to say to everyone, please support your local bookstores. And this book I just loved every moment, and down to the last few lines of the acknowledgments are like a story in and of themselves. It's just beautiful. And I mean, that's a great little surprise. Talking about surprises, like get all the way there and then you go, oh, there's more for me, So please buy Jen's book, Mannequin and Wife. And we will all look forward to the novel happening.
The current working title, I'll tell you, the current working title of my novel is A Young Lady's Guide to World Domination. So
excellent.
That sounds good.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jen. Thank you and congratulations that with that title. We're talk about a teaser right there. That's
exactly.
That's it. And then there'll be a movie to come from that, no doubt. So thank you so much. And AK, thank you so much for being here today with Jen. Congratulations, Jen. I posted some links, first of all, of course, for Jen's professional website, and then for purchasing Mannequin and Wife. We have other upcoming events, and we always appreciate authors like Jen and AK of being in conversation and inspiring us and being so engaged and enthusiastic and sharing the challenge, but then the true joy. And it really came across today from you, Jen, and I credit AK for bringing that to us at this event, that it is possible to have a virtual event and really someone like Jen just sparkle and just break out. And I just love it. And I hope everybody takes a look at this on YouTube as the wonderful example for an author event, because this was really an outstanding author event. And I want to thank the two of you for being here today. And thanks to our audience for supporting Jen and her book, Mannequin and Wife, and to AK. Thank you, AK. I know you're working on something.
Thank you.
So come on now. We're looking for you. We gotta have a reboot of this.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I'll interview.
Oh,
AK.
that would be fun.
Exactly. I think that's the second teaser has just emerged. Take the
That's
show
right.
on the virtual road. Right.
Let's do it.
And I
Let's do
tell
it.
you, we want to see it. We want to see it.
I'm in.
Thank you. Me too.
And
Thanks,
thank
audience.
you, Patricia. Thank
Oh,
you,
I'm
Patricia and
delighted to be here.
Malaprop.
I'm delighted, and I know that as the person who's was the bookseller looking over at the baristas, I'm like, how do they manage to do what they do? And the answer is they become published authors. That's the answer. So take that.
That's
So,
right.
and I love it. I love those stories. Thank you for supporting independent bookstores, and congratulations, Jen. Thanks again, audience. And we'll see you two next time, because I know there's going to be a next time. And have a great afternoon. Thanks so
Great.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.